morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of interesting polls breaking out this morning, both on the Democratic side, some problems with Biden and non-white voters, and also on the Republican side, some interesting insights into who is actually the most electable. So I guess sort of surprising. We also have new comments from Mitch McConnell about what exactly is going on with him and his health, and we also have new comments from Dianne Feinstein, where she appeared to forget that she had given her daughter power of attorney over her personal affairs. Also, some details about how a doom loop that is coming for commercial real estate could really imperil a lot of the commercial banking sector. So we'll dig into that. We've also got some new details about how Gen Z feels about college is much different from how millennials felt about college. And a very interesting speech from Mike Pence condemning populism and asserting his view of what the Republican Party should be. Spoiler alert, sounds a lot like the past of what the Republican Party has been. So
there's a lot to say about it.
It's actually very interesting. So we'll dig into that. We're also excited to have YouTuber Fantano, music critic, on to do a little fun segment dissecting the political playlist, the music playlist of some of the presidential contenders. So that should be a fun one.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get into any of that, though, we want to thank all of the premium subscribers who've been helping us out, because we are super, super excited to be putting together our very first ever focus group. And I can now reveal to you a few of the details of this focus group. So it's happening this weekend. We should have some results to bring to you next week. It's among Republican voters in the state of New Hampshire. So we should get a good view from them about what candidates they're considering, what candidates they're with. Some of them are sort of settled on their candidates. Some of them are undecided. So we'll dig into all of that and some of the top issues. It should be really cool.
What I'm most excited for from our focus group and the work that we've put into it and on top of our team and the firm that we've partnered with is we're trying to get to stuff that the mainstream media doesn't ask. We're going to ask economic questions. We're going to try and get into the deeper, like what motivates voters, and actually get to some uniting factors, and more so just move towards the structural things that affect everyday people's lives, as opposed to just pure horse race. So we're going to do our best here. We're really excited to put that work in. As we've said before, though, it costs a lot of money. So if you are able to, breakingpoints.com to become a premium member. We think you're going to get a lot out of it, both to listen to, but really, I think it's going to be a very visual medium. I think people are going to want to watch some of the stuff that we put together.
Absolutely. Yeah. It should be really cool, and we want to hear from you about what you think of it when we get it all together and present the results. Let us know what you think, and if you enjoy it and you get something out of it, also let us know what we should do next, because perhaps this is the thing that we, it's not just a one-off. It's exciting. We could continue to do moving forward. All right. So speaking of polls and focus groups and politics and all of the rest, some pretty dire numbers for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party among non-white voters. And this was a very interesting analysis put together by the New York Times' Nate Cohn. Let's put this up on the screen. We've got some of the graphics here. So what these charts show is consistent signs of erosion in Black and Hispanic support for Biden, and really not just for Biden. I mean, they start to track this shift back in 2012. It really begins to accelerate with some of the realignment that occurs with Donald Trump in 2016. These lines track the sentiment of Black and brown and other non-white voters towards Democrats and support for the Democratic Party across these years by different demographic groups. So the first one that you see there is just by race and ethnicity. You can see Black support declining. You can see all non-white support declining. You can see Hispanic support declining. They don't have Asian broken out here because they just didn't have a large enough sample size. Then they go on to gender. It's among both genders, male and female. They go to age. It's among both ages, both age groups that they break out here. Then they go to education. You see this trend among non-college and college degree holding. However, the trend is much steeper among non-college degree holding non-white voters. And among income groups, you also see the decline happening among basically all income groups, but it is particularly notable among those making less than 50K, and actually among those who are making more than 100K, so that's the highest income group, you actually see the trend reversing somewhat. So this is consistent with that sorting of voters among education and class lines that we have sort of consistently tracked over the years. So they make the point that Mr. Biden is underperforming most among non-white voters making less than $100,000 per year, at least temporarily erasing the century-old tendency for Democrats to fare better among lower income than higher income non-white voters. Now, it's not like non-white voters, Saagar, are flocking in droves to the Republican Party,
Yes.
although they do note that there is a modest group of 5% of non-white Biden voters who now say they support Mr. Trump. So there has been some small shift actually affirmatively towards Trump. However, the bigger thing that Democrats are concerned about, and the bigger worry for them out of numbers like this, is that these voters just aren't going to show up.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we saw in the midterms. It's not like non-white voters went to the Republican Party. It's just they were not nearly as animated about this election as white voters were, who have basically maintained their support for the Democratic Party across the Trump and Biden years. It's just that they didn't show up. Their turnout was way down. And when you're talking about these razor-thin margins, and when you're looking at polls that are coming out that show Biden and Trump tied in a general election head-to-head matchup, this is an important part of the story of why Biden is struggling to break out ahead of Trump at this point.
Yeah, the line that just stuck out to me is this quote, I mean, which is just unbelievable, guys, if we can put it up there on the screen. It's so important for people to understand. I mean, when he is underperforming amongst non-white voters, making less than $100,000 per year, that quote, it temporarily erases the century-old tendency for Democrats to fare better amongst lower income than higher income non-white voters. This is a full-blown political realignment that we're watching. And if it does manifest whenever it comes to the polling, I mean, to the actual polling stations and where people are pulling the lever for votes, that is just unbelievable. It also does make sense, though, in terms of the issue set that is most animating for the new Democratic base, which is abortion. And listen, we've talked about it before. Actually, Freddie DeBoer made a good point, which is abortion really is one of those things that cuts across class lines. One of the reasons why it is particularly animating, but let's be real, you know, it's white, liberal, women in particular who are the most animated about it. Nothing wrong, just saying, though, that those are the people who are voting the most whenever it comes to that issue. Well, if that's the only issue set that you're really running on, then people who are most motivated by economic factors, they're either going to stay home or they're going to look elsewhere, or they're just going to be particularly pissed off, and they may, you know, it may take something at the very last minute to convince them to vote, which is pretty devastating whenever that's your pitch as a party. I mean, it's not just abortion that Biden's running on. He continues to embrace the emblem Bidenomics for some reason that none of us understand. It's very clear from these numbers. Working class, non-white voters do not subscribe to Bidenomics or the Bidenomics message at all.
So this is actually the entire subject of my monologue today, which is that the experience of the average voter of the Biden administration has been one of seeing every pandemic-era aid program that genuinely helped a lot of people. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of suffering during COVID too. But if you look at the numbers, people were able to pay down their debt. People were able to have a little bit of a cushion in their bank account. You think about the child tax credit. You think about the direct checks. You think about support for affordable childcare. All of these things, expanded health care. All of these things got stripped away over the course of the Biden administration. And you add to that increasing prices, making it much more difficult for people to be able to afford the things they need, just the basics of survival, and wildly unaffordable housing, perhaps the least affordable housing market that, you know, we've seen certainly in our lifetimes, perhaps ever. And it spells a lot of trouble. Now, long term, I actually think some of the things that Biden has done have been good and will benefit the economy in the long term. The industrial policy, you think about the CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction Act, you think about the moves on unions, the moves on antitrust. But those things are not hitting people's bank accounts today.
Yep.
And so in terms of what matters when people are casting their votes, the fact that their material interests haven't been put first and foremost for especially, you know, lower income or working class voters, yeah, that's going to matter. Matt Karp is a historian, scholar, author, et cetera, who studies this stuff really closely. He calls it less class realignment and more class de-alignment. It's that in the past, you could have predicted, okay, based on your income, if you're lower income, you're more likely to be a Democratic Party supporter, certainly during the New Deal era, because that's where your material interests lie. Increasingly, you just can't predict. Like, it's just sort of like a toss-up. You can't tell anything. Based on someone's income, they might be a Republican, they might be a Democrat. And so it's less that there's a, you know, all these voters flocking to the Republican Party, and more that there's just a reversion to a 50-50 split, because neither party is dealing directly with people's material interests in a way that they feel in a concrete, immediate way today.
And I don't blame them. How can you? You know, whenever you look at the issue set, that's not really what's up for grabs, especially for our politicians. I wish it wasn't that way, but it certainly is. Class D alignment is an excellent, excellent point, and it fits with something I've been trying to hammer home here for years now, which is we're mostly polarized on educational lines. If you went to a four-year college degree, you're probably going to vote for a Democrat. If you didn't, you're probably going to be a Republican, absent the fact if you are a black voter. But, you know, and Hispanics are converging towards that trend. Black, even younger black voters are starting to converge to that trend. White voters, that is entirely where the split is. That's why I'm so fascinated here to see the non-white voter, where it's it's mostly concentrated where they would still vote Democrat even if they did not attend a four-year college degree institution. Well, in this case, and I always tell this, that doesn't mean they're going to be Republicans, guys. Other Republicans who are listening who are like, yeah, absolutely. They just may not vote. And there's 100 million people in this country who don't vote. A lot of people don't vote.
Yeah.
I've not voted in the past because I just didn't care. And I actually think that is an affirmative choice, you know, for many people, which I do not judge really at all, which is I'm checking out. And that's a feeling overwhelmingly where it's a feeling, it's a real undermining of faith in our democracy. And it's one where increasingly, the more partisan that we become, we'll accelerate Class D alignment, and we'll probably accelerate the non-white voting or the non-voting trend even more so than where it is right now, which is actually, you know, it's a catastrophe in the long run.
I mean,
for civil engagement.
Ironically, because Trump is such a cultural touchstone and, like, you know, made politics culture and vice versa, voting participation has been up in the Trump era.
It was very high in 2020.
Yeah, it was very high in 2020. Actually, in a lot of these special elections that we've been tracking that have centered around abortion, turnout has been extremely high. So there's actually been an increase in the level of engagement. But it'll be interesting to see if that holds in this election when you have so much dissatisfaction with both of these choices. And it's really going to turn on the voters who hate both of these men, you know, assuming it's Trump and Biden who are facing off again, which certainly looks like the most plausible outcome at this point. Those people who hate both of them, who do they break for? That's probably going to be the determinative factor, given the fact that, you know, both of them have like 30-something% approval ratings. Both of them, people are like, really, you're going to run again? Nobody wants you. Like, please move on. Can we please have some other choices? And yet here we are locked into this battle between these guys. Let me also put this next piece up on the screen, which is funny, amusing, and also sad.
Just this headline.
I know. NBC News. Okay, here's the headline. Democratic elites struggle to get voters as excited about Biden as they are. Now, I question whether they are actually that excited about Joe Biden. Yeah. I am a little skeptical that these are not stupid people. They can see his shortcomings in terms of his vigor. That was a good word you used the other day, Saagar, in terms of his sort of like presidential vigor, et cetera. I mean, they can see that he's not the most exciting, charismatic figure. So I'm a little skeptical that these Democratic elites are as excited as NBC News is reporting them to be. But they're trying very hard to convince the electorate that, you know, this is a great affirmative choice, that this is the best person that the Democratic Party could possibly put forward. And they're having difficulties getting voters to buy into this. There's one guy, Rich Thau, who ran a focus group in May of swing voters who'd switched from Trump in 2016 to Biden in 2020. He said, the analogy I like to use is Trump and Biden are like the fifth place team playing the sixth place team, and you're required to root for one of them. There's a lot of quotes from voters in here who are basically like the same. I mean, people were like, I'll vote for Biden if that's who it ends up being, but I really wish there was another choice. So a lot of dissatisfaction in the rank and file.
Hillary, in many respects, lost some of the close states just because a lot of black voters just didn't vote. A lot of them didn't come out to vote in Detroit or Milwaukee or any of these places where it was a razor-thin margin, and Trump was able to win Michigan, and he was able to win Wisconsin. Low turnout in the city of Philadelphia almost certainly cost Hillary the state of Pennsylvania. So it's one of those where, I mean, of course, the Democrats, many of them turned around and they're like, no, it's your fault for staying at home. It's like, yeah, well, maybe motivate them, you know, actually get them to come out to the polls. I could see a scenario right here where Biden puts himself right back in that situation. Look at Georgia. I mean, last time I checked, a lot of black Democrats in the state of Georgia. If younger voters don't come out, okay, Trump just won Georgia. Same in Arizona. I mean, you could see the exact same thing scenario playing out with Hispanic voters. So Nevada, any of these states, when you're playing with fire like this, you just have no idea what things are going to look like on election day, and you're setting yourself up very much for failure. So it's one of those trends where, I mean, this is probably one of the most important voting trends in, I mean, as you put it, in the century. It is literally a complete, realignment, de-alignment, whatever the hell you want to call it. But it is a change, and it's a major change in the way that people vote in this country.
They said in the New York Times piece, those tallies of non-white voters might be the worst for a Democratic leader among Black and Hispanic voters since Walter Mondale in 1984. Just to give you a sense of how this is all looking. And the Democrats are so terrified of any kind of democracy. I mean, of course, Joe Biden wants to keep his hold on power. Okay, that is what it is. But they really believe that by opening up an actual real democratic primary process, that they stand to lose from that. And I just can't wrap my head around that being the case when voters are so eager and anxious. I mean, we got new numbers this morning from CNN of still a majority of Democratic voters saying, we really want someone else. And so, if this is your guy and he earns his place and they evaluate their other options and they're like, okay, you know what, Joe is the best guy, you're also going to generate more enthusiasm for him if people don't feel like he's just being foisted on them and they have no other choice. So, I think that if their goal, and it's a big question mark whether really their number one goal is to defeat Trump, but if that is their goal, I really think they're hamstringing themselves by closing off even the possibility of an open Democratic primary choice. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.